This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform you can use to build a website for your business. If you put together a list of some of your favorite working directors of the last 2 decades, there's a decent chance that Rodrigo Prieto has shot for one of them. Martin Scorsese, Spike Lee, Alejandro Inarritu, Greta Gerwig, Oliver Stone, the list goes on. Although his cinematography spans decades, it often contains a deliberate use of rich, saturated colors, a widescreen aspect ratio, and visually bold decisions, which are always focused on presenting a subjective view of the character to the audience. So in this episode, let's dive into how Prieto's philosophy on image making affects the camera and pick out some of the film gear he uses to create his masterful images.
I try to make the cinematography subjective, and that's in every movie really. I try to make the audience as much as possible be in the perspective of the character. That is not only literally the camera angle being like in the POV of a character, it's more making the camera behave and the lighting and everything about it, the texture and the feel of the movie behave like the main person we're following.
The idea of creating images that put the viewer into the shoes of the protagonist is one of the underlying philosophies in his work. For example, how do we visually convey a character's progression from a naive, straight-laced graduate to an excessive, risk-taking, paranoid white-collar criminal? The camera could start by moving with a smooth, steady motion under a well-exposed light, and later shift to a rough, raw, handheld aesthetic with harder light and stronger shadows. Or, if we take another story, how do we visually present a series of interweaving timelines and narratives so that the audience doesn't get too confused? You could do it by using a different color cast for each different character arc, using more sickly, cooler tones for a man in need of medical care, and a much warmer palette for a man trying to hold his life together through his faith. Or, how do you put the audience in the shoes of a disorientated warrior during a surreal near-death experience during a battle? How about by radically shifting color out of the bounds of reality? You could pick apart each and every one of the films he shoots in this way and uncover a philosophical rationale behind the often bold decision-making that supports the story. It's more about creating a feeling and a tone that is representative of a character's state of mind than it is about shooting from the physical POV or perspective of the protagonist. Each director he works for brings a different artistic sensibility. However, the camera's subjectivity is always present.
Every director is completely different. For example, Ang Lee is very precise and also very methodical. And he likes to pick the focal length, the lens, and he talks to me about the framing, the composition. He will look through a viewfinder and he'll tell me I have that corner of that window in frame and this and that, you know. Oliver Stone thrives in chaos. So every time I said, Oliver, we have this problem with the camera, there was a bump in the dolly, whatever, he'd say like, Rodrigo, perfect, this is the end, we have good. And Scorsese is maybe a mix of both. He's very precise in the shot listing he designs, and he has a very good idea of the energy he needs the camera to have. But he also leaves space for improvisation by the actors and for new ideas to come.
Being able to adapt to how different directors work is an important skill. Cinematographers should be able to offer both their technical skills and practical advice on how to achieve a desired look or an unconventional shot, as well as lighting each scene. Some directors like to maintain more control over how each shot is composed, while other directors may just describe a tone or feeling that they want to achieve, and then leave room for the DP to offer their own ideas and suggestions as to how to achieve that. When working with directors that like to maintain creative control over small details, it helps to build up a trust in their visual sensibilities and accept the challenge of focusing on the lighting and technical execution of the shots. Sometimes it may also be necessary to surrender control of minor visual details in order to capture better performances.
The performances were the essential thing in this film, so I had to compromise sometimes the possibilities of the lighting to be sure we captured the performance of these amazing actors.
Yeah. On The Irishman, this meant embracing the decision to use multiple cameras to cover dialogue scenes, which allowed them to get greater coverage of the performances. The reason this may compromise cinematic choices is because the more pieces of gear that you place within a set, the more you limit the kind of angles you can shoot, or the space that you can place light without it getting blocked or seen in the shot. To further complicate things, they had to use an interesting but cumbersome rig that actually accommodated 3 cinema cameras in order to de-age characters. But before we break down how this camera technology was used, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Squarespace. If you want to be a cinematographer like Rodrigo, one thing that you'll need is a website, which you can set up using Squarespace. A website is like an online business card that collaborators and clients can use to both get in contact with you and at the same time showcase a portfolio of your video content or creative work. I set one up when I began pursuing cinematography and also when I started this YouTube channel. Squarespace makes it super easy to get started with their intuitive, beautifully designed gallery and portfolio templates. They also have extensions like Print on Demand, which lets you sell your business's products online with minimal effort and without any big upfront costs. To set up your website, be sure to head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/indepthcine to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. This 3D rig consisted of a red helium that could shoot high-res 8K files that could later be used for VFX work. This camera was placed in the center of the rig and captured the actual shot and frame that they would use. 2 special infrared Alexa Minis were then placed alongside the capture camera as witness cameras that also had an infrared ring light to neutralize shadows that could only be picked up by the Minis and wouldn't show up on the recorded red image. They could use these reference clips with the recorded clips and combine it with some AI and machine learning powered by an NVIDIA GPU chip to de-age the actors. Prieto got his camera and grip team to reconfigure this large rig and made it more modular so that the witness cameras could be moved around to either be alongside the main camera or at the top and bottom. This allowed them to use this hefty setup on a variety of grip rigs. Prieto's photographic decisions are often bold and use color expressively. Across his career, he's manipulated color in different ways as the technology has progressed. He's done it photochemically with film, by using a combination of film and the digital intermediate, as well as with digital cameras and the color grade. Let's compare some of the techniques he's used, starting with film. The most common way of shooting on film is to use a color negative stock and expose and develop it normally. However, Prieto has often experimented with different stocks and development methods. For example, on Alexander, he used the rare Kodak Ektachrome 2443 EIR stock. Sometimes called aerochrome, it's sensitive to infrared light and displays color in unusual and often unpredictable ways, turning greens to red, purple, or blue. He rated the stock at 125 ISO and used an ND 0.3 and a yellow number 12 filter to make the effects of infrared light more intense. Another technique he used in many films, such as Memoirs, is a type of development called bleach bypass processing. During the processing of film in a lab, the step of bleaching the film is skipped. This results in a black and white layer that is overlaid on top of the color image, which reduces the saturation of color but increases both the contrast and film grain, creating a raw, gritty look. Instead of doing this technique photochemically on Babel, he did it in the digital intermediate. In other words, he processed the film normally, then added a half bleach bypass look to the film in the color grade. This allowed him to control the intensity of the look, creating color that was somewhere in between a bleach bypass and regular development. As the technology has shifted more towards digital, he's been able to do everything digitally instead of photochemically, from picking the look of a stock to choosing a development method, all within the grade. On The Irishman, he chose to differentiate the time periods by applying different film emulation LUTs to both the digital and film footage from different eras. A Kodachrome look for the 50s, an Ektachrome look for the 60s, and a bleach bypass development look for the 70s onward. You can see how foliage looks different across these looks, including deeper shades of blue and stronger contrast in the shadows for the 50s, a bit of a warmer look in the 60s, and a very desaturated but high contrast look from the 70s onwards. He's used many lenses over the years, but has often reverted to shooting in a widescreen format with anamorphic glass, such as the Hawk V lights, the Arri Master Anamorphics or Panavision G series. Prieto also likes using Arri cameras, whether that's the ArriCam Studio or Lite when shooting on film, or on variations of the Alexa when shooting digitally. Another example of how he uses color can be found in how he lights night interiors and exteriors. He often uses quite a classic technique of creating alternate planes of color in different parts of the image. Specifically, he likes to create pockets of warm light indoors, and then place cooler blue sources of light outside of windows. This creates increased color contrast and more depth in the frame. Although he often paints with lots of color and quite strong visual techniques, it is always done deliberately. Prieto uses the technical tools at his disposal to craft images that create a mood that mimics that of the main protagonist, whether that's through his use of color, lighting, or camera movement. The cinematography remains subjective and deliberate in a way that subtly, or sometimes not so subtly, helps to support the story. This has been another episode of Cinematography Style. As usual, a special thanks to all the patrons for your continued support of the channel, and also thanks to everyone else who watches these videos. Otherwise, until next time, thanks for watching and goodbye.